So I think that a lot of the challenge as a musician is to keep growing in many directions and to expand, of course, the knowledge, the experience, but also the instinct and the childlike nature to keep it and to foster that. So.
Hello, Adam.
Morning. Or
How
good
are you?
afternoon, rather.
Yeah, it's morning where you are.
You are in Vienna, right?
Yes, that's right. Where exactly are you at the moment?
So this is my home in Washington Heights in New York City,
Yeah.
and I've lived here for about 12 years, so it's really home for me.
Really?
Yeah.
So where did you grow up?
Well, I'm Polish American. I was born in Houston, but my family's Polish, so I was brought up in a really Polish-speaking household. Only Polish at home. I didn't actually speak any English until I went to school in America. So.
Oh, but but it's a very difficult language to learn. So it's wonderful that you learned that when you were still a child.
For sure. I'm very grateful to my parents for that, because learning it would be very difficult. So having the language naturally is a huge gift.
And I think it's also important to speak the language at home, with your family, the language that's the family's language, even though you live in a different country, because I think that's for a child a very important part of them growing up.
Certainly, I think it changes the perspective of even growing up in one country, but to have the other language, it opens, I think, the possibility of seeing the world in a slightly different way at all times.
Yeah. So, and your family, are they, do you have musicians in the family?
Oh, yes. Pretty much all musicians. My mother is a pianist. She teaches now, and my father tunes and rebuilds pianos for a living. So, and one of my brothers is a conductor. Yes, so there's a lot of musicians in the family.
That's amazing. And is this why your parents came to America from Poland?
Well, sort of. My parents left Poland in the late 70s, and my father had a job as a trombonist. He used to be a trombonist before he started working on pianos. So yes, I guess you could say that they left Poland to go to Mexico and then to Houston, and then I was born there. So I'm the only one born in the U.S. in my family. So.
Oh, I see. Okay. And do you think it's when there's so many musicians in the family, do you think this is almost then natural to have that a love for the music, that you want to become a musician yourself?
I would think so. I mean, there are many great musicians who come from completely non-musical backgrounds, I guess, but I suppose if you grew up hearing the music from the moment you're born, maybe before, then it's only natural to feel extremely close to it and drawn to it. So I would think so, but I can't compare to any other experience. Of course, I've only had mine.
But
so
I find it so interesting, because I sometimes speak to musicians who say, my parents can't even sing a note, in tune, and yet they become singers or so. So it's me always interesting this. You either get where it's an all musical family, or where there's nobody in the family who's does music. So yeah,
wow.
but I just
you
think
are a photographer primarily, right?
Yeah, I'm a
sorry.
No, I just think as a child, if you hear, like you say, if you hear the music constantly, that you already have that familiarity with the music. And of course, the example of what you can become.
Right. I think so. I would think so. I mean, the sounds are around you all the time, so it's only natural. But you're a photographer primarily, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I've seen your photos that you send, wonderful photos. But are you also involved in music directly, or just you have contact with many musicians?
I don't have any. I didn't have any knowledge of the music industry, but then during lockdown, I took the pictures of. I don't know if you saw that project. I took pictures of 500 artists. Many were musicians that I took their pictures in their windows when they were in lockdown, and this is actually where it started, and then it became interviews with artists over the world who were in lockdown, and then I just thought, hey, this is so interesting. Let me keep on to asking, because I think these interviews are very inspirational, and I think artists have a lot to contribute to society, and your outlook on life and how you live your lives, I think, are also very interesting and very motivational. So this is where it comes from. Yeah.
Wow. And are you Austrian or?
No, I'm South African.
South African, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
But you live in Vienna.
I live in Vienna, yeah. But now tell me, so you are probably asked this many times, but when did you start playing the piano?
Well, I have been playing pretty much my whole life because there was always a piano around and piano students of my mother's around. And so I suppose there was not a definite starting point, but I guess lessons sort of became regular around age 5 or so, violin first, around 4. I studied both instruments, but I decided after a while that I hated standing up, so I quit the violin.
Oh, okay. And did you get piano lessons from your mom?
I did for the first few years, but eventually we decided, well, I should say she decided it wasn't the right fit, because I was very sensitive and I was always crying when she criticized me. So we couldn't really make much progress because I was too sensitive. And luckily, another teacher came along that I was very excited about. And so my mother very happily passed me on to that teacher.
Okay. And the violin, you said, how long did you play the violin?
Well, I don't remember exactly. First few years I played violin, but I was never serious about it. Yeah, it was pretty bad, I think, for me and for those around me.
Oh, okay.
Who heard me play. Yeah, it's a difficult. I mean, piano, I think, is an instrument where you can quite easily make a decent sound, and violin is an instrument where it takes a lifetime to make a decent sound, and it takes unbelievable expertise to make a decent sound. So I think that especially if you don't have a natural inclination or don't feel good with the instrument, it can be really a misery. So I could hear that I didn't make a nice sound, and everything was so difficult and complicated, and the teachers were always fixing my position, and I found it exhausting. I didn't feel free creatively to express much as a child, and I think piano was just such a comfortable instrument for me. I loved it, and it's big and exciting.
But it's interesting that you say that, because this is what I also find fascinating, is how musicians get to their instruments. How they find the sound that almost brings out the creative or the artistic aspect of them out. So it's interesting that you say that you just couldn't do the violin, or couldn't figure out how to get that right sound, but that the piano is your instrument.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, for sure. I love the piano to this day.
And was there a specific point that you can remember that where you thought, okay, now I think I'm going to do this as a career?
Well, I think that I knew early. I mean, probably by the time I was 9 or 10 years old, I was sure. I was really sure.
Really?
So,
Mm.
yeah, for better or for worse, I don't know, whether that's such a healthy thing, but for some reason, I was so determined, and I just loved it so much, and my excitement was always to get the newest CD back in the day when we had CDs, or the newest sheet music. Well, that's another thing. I still play, as you can see behind me from the scores. I don't use an iPad to play, but many people do. But I think I'm very attached to the idea of the sheet music, because when I was a child, I was waiting. If I earned any money from a contest or anything, I was just waiting and dying to go to the store and buy, that piece by, I don't know, Liszt that I never had the music to. And then I would go home, and even though I couldn't play it, I would stare at it for hours, and try. And yeah, that was so fun. I mean, that was amazing. So I love the books, I love that. But anyway, I digress. Yeah, I think that I just knew quite early on, and the passion fueled me for better, for worse. And that hasn't changed.
Was there also a specific composer that at that time, because you mentioned Liszt now, but was there composers that you particularly was fond of the music?
As a child?
Yeah.
Certainly. Well, as we spoke about, I grew up in a Polish household. So the ultimate figure in our musical Polish home was, of course, Frédéric Chopin. And I really was raised on a diet of almost only Chopin. I mean, I was playing Chopin nonstop, and that was the first love of my musical life. And I really played tons of Chopin until I hit my rebellious teenage years. And then I think I started to really get particularly passionate about other composers. And funny enough, I would say that my main repertoire as an adult so far has been actually more Beethoven and Brahms. Those are sort of the two that I felt closest to, but also Schubert. But I would say, somehow the composers that lived in Vienna, funny enough, those have become sort of my favorites, and the ones that I've spent the most time with, and not as much Chopin as an adult, although of course, I mean, every pianist is intimately familiar with every piece by Chopin, because it's the foundation of the history of the piano.
Oh, I see. And yeah, but in those phases that you went through to where you are now, say, where you like these composers, like you say, like Beethoven and so, do you think that it also changed how you played? So if you play now Chopin, how do you think you play it also differently now?
Certainly. Well, I think that early on, especially children, I mean, play, really, I would say, primarily instinctively, and they, as they grow, they must learn how to understand what they're doing, no matter how good or bad it is. I mean, of course, we know some children are just miracles and play at the highest level, but still, eventually they must become conscious of what they're doing in order to get better or to mature. And many times that of course destroys the incredible, level of playing or talent of, wunderkinds or whatnot. I mean, I wasn't anything like that. But I mean, I would say, good as a child, but not a, prodigy or anything like that. So I think that the difficult thing is that on one hand, the wonderful children must become conscious of what they're doing to change things and to improve. And oftentimes for many adult musicians, I think it's the opposite. Sort of, it's they learn and they amass a lot of experience and skills and insights, but then in the end of the day, hopefully they can somehow learn to play like children again, and to really just play completely with instinct. So I think that a lot of the challenge as a musician is to keep growing in many directions, and to expand, of course, the knowledge, the experience, but also the instinct and the childlike nature, to keep it and to foster that. So how has it changed? I'm probably the worst person to ask, because I try not to think too much about it, about how I've changed, or I find that the more I think about it, the more self-conscious I am. So I try not to think about it as much as possible.
No, because a pianist once told me, Ben Skuman, he said that there's certain pieces of Beethoven, for example, that you should really only be playing when you are much older, because there's something in these pieces that you need that experience, and you need a sort of a life experience to be able to play these pieces.
Well, I think that's definitely true, but the issue is, how do you play them well when you're older if you don't play them badly when you're younger, right?
Oh yeah.
So that's the in a way the thing. So I mean, Beethoven has been I would say, the kind of most primary focus of my work so far. And I learned all of Beethoven's piano sonatas as a teenager, and I played them all however I played them, but I played them. And now recently I tried again the whole set, the whole cycle of the 32 piano sonatas, and I think that it was different, and I can only hope that it will be different and better in the future, because it's an overwhelming project and a very humbling project. So but I do believe that sometimes we have to just take the risk and try, even if it is true that I mean, particularly with Beethoven's late works, there's so many layers of meaning and emotion with every silence between every note. But for that to grow, I think you have to start somewhere. You really have to start somewhere. So I don't discourage, like when I don't really teach right now, but when I did teach, I wouldn't discourage my students to try things that are way beyond them, unless it was really kind of, let's say, unless it could injure them technically or create some terrible habits, or it was really, in that sense, of course, you have to be careful. But more or less, particularly when it's a question of depth of musical understanding or emotional understanding, I definitely don't discourage any students, because I think it's important to jump into it, because that's how you build the relationship with that piece by yourself. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, well, that's like Seth Godin. I heard an interview with him, and he said you can only do good writing after you've done bad writing, and it's like you say, it's the same with the playing. But tell me, how much do you communicate when you do concerts, for example? How much do you communicate what you are doing to your audience Do you think that is important?
That's a really interesting question, Petra. Thanks. I think about it all the time because I think that question epitomizes the difficult balancing act of any artist, which is whether they do something for themselves or for the public. And, if I go to a concert, I personally prefer not to be spoken to. I personally prefer just to hear music. I don't want to hear the artist speak. But I also realize that I am absolutely in the minority, and almost everybody I know disagrees with that position, even many musicians, and think it's wonderful when the artist speaks to the audience, particularly if they do it, compellingly and well. So, that's this question that I ask myself. In an ideal world, I would prefer to be completely in the world of the music and the sound and the composer and the instrument, and to communicate with the audience only through the music. But I also recognize that for many people, it's a completely different experience and a much deeper experience. I think if you say some words that help to maybe bring them a little closer into the experience, if it's not something they're already inside of. So I think there's a very deep value to that. So I sort of try to balance that with myself, because I think on one hand, I'd rather not speak too much, but at the same time, I think it can be very interesting, very valuable. So I do it, but I try to focus on helping the audience to come closer to the music, and sort of help transition from wherever they were before the concert to the concert, rather than, let's say, give a lecture. I don't like it so much when a musician says, well, Ludwig van Beethoven was born in 1770 and he wrote this piece, when he was, and that's not so interesting. I think what's more interesting is to paint a little bit of a picture and set the atmosphere, let's say, and create a connection on a human level.
Yeah. I totally agree with you there. I think it's sometimes that, because I'm not a musician, and I don't have knowledge of music, but I've been to concerts where the artist would say just something that steers me sort of in a direction that I can make up my own interpretation, or I can start thinking or feeling it different, sensing it differently. And I think that is important. I agree with you that it shouldn't be a lecture, or a whole history lesson or something. That's not the thing. But I think it's sort of, it just steers you in a direction.
What is it like for you if you see a photography exhibit? Would you prefer to just see the photographs, or do you like to hear insights from the photographer?
Well, this is where it's different, because I read pictures, so I make my own interpretation. But it's because I take a lot of pictures and I read my pictures as well. And but I love to tell people what I see, or why I took this picture, or I like to maybe I do it too much, but but I think it's because you are a musician that you don't need to hear explanations, or you have it because you've got the knowledge, because it's in your head. And I think that is sometimes the thing. But yeah, I don't mind if somebody, when it's a photograph, but I sort of read it myself. But you know what I mean.
I really like that expression, to read a photograph.
Yeah,
I don't think I've heard it used that way, but I think that's very similar to how I feel, and why I don't personally want the musicians to say too much or anything, because I want to be completely in the musical experience, because I guess I'm reading that experience as well.
Yeah.
But if I take photography, for instance, something that I enjoy and try to follow but know very little about, basically, then I would say when I read something from the artist next to the photo, or something that makes me notice something I never noticed before, then I'm very grateful for that. So I try to remember that when I'm giving a concert, and if I'm asked to speak and I think, oh gosh, I really don't want to, but then I do, and then it seems to really create a different experience for the audience. So it's definitely not black and white. It's definitely not, because I also I don't think it's a good thing to make everybody attached to the idea that they have to hear some words in order to hear a piece of music. That's also dangerous, I think. So I don't know. I'm not sure.
Well, yeah, but I find with photography, for example, sometimes when I've taken a picture of somebody, and I can sit in front of my computer when I look through these pictures, and I can really get a moment like, wow, I think I've got in this picture the person's personality, or what I sense from this person from meeting them, and from, that I think, okay, this picture totally, for me, is this person. And then when it comes to them choosing it, they don't necessarily choose that one. And then I realize, because it's not what they see from that, it's not how they see themselves, it's how I saw them through my experience with being with them. And I think that is sometimes the difficult part to and I think maybe for you as a pianist as well, you must sense the music, and you must sense parts of the music that really move you or touch you, and but it's not always that people will get that same feeling or that same emotion in those points, where you play.
Certainly. I think that reminds me of recording, because especially when we put a recording together after a recording session, and it's a matter of choosing the best takes and stitching it all together. I think that's a little bit a similar thing, because oftentimes there's a producer who takes notes during the session and says, okay, this was the best take, and this was the best take, and this was the best take. And then of course, if the artist listens themselves, then it can be a completely different recording, right? They have a completely different idea. So that can be challenging. I mean, during a session, it's very important to trust whoever's producing or leading the session, because there's no time. So you have to sort of trust that the producer is hearing fresh and objectively, and or more so than the performer, who's emotionally exhausted and physically exhausted from recording. I've always wondered about that, because then I sometimes wait 6 months to start listening and to start deciding what I'll use. And oftentimes I completely disagree with what the producer thought. And I end up choosing my own editing plan. But I guess it's different a little bit than what you were saying, because if I make a recording, I'm recording a piece by a composer, and so it sort of also becomes a little bit of an argument between the producer and the pianist, what the idea of the composer and of the composition is, right? But I guess when it's a photo of somebody, it's just idea of who the person is, right? So there's not another party involved. So that's very interesting. Do you ever find that you are in complete agreement with somebody, that they see themselves and you see them and it's the same photo?
Yeah, no, that happens. But usually when it doesn't happen, then I've made peace with that, because in the beginning it was for me difficult, because then I think, why can't they see you know, because it's for me then a picture that I really that I think so, oh wow, you know, this was that moment, or that look in their eye, or just that that I think, okay, wow, I captured more than just this image, you know, this is really, I feel I can see something in the picture, but then I just realized that it's not for me, you know, I'm just it's the person, it's their picture. In the end of the day, they have to be happy with what they see and how they see themselves, and maybe in a few years time, when maybe they have something personal, and then maybe in a few years time they will see what I saw, or maybe never, you know, or maybe it's just me seeing. So I think it's that thing where you just have to release it then, and just think, well, it's not my picture anyway to decide, you know. So but now I want to ask you, because this is very interesting what you're saying is, and I've been speaking to artists over lockdown as well, and we talked about this, the value of art and the value of artists. And now that you're mentioning this about your choice and the producer, and how much freedom do you think you as an artist have to do, say, for example, to record what you want to record and not to record what the label wants you to record, for example?
Well, I can only speak about, you know, my singular experience, which is that I've only recorded for one label, and they are wonderful, and so far have been extremely accommodating of what my, you know, dreams and passions musically are. So in that sense, I think I've been lucky, but also I think it's sort of a time where the majority of artists are sort of doing things more independently, or it's not like, you know, like it used to be where there's a few big labels that, and you know, if you have to sort of be with one, and you have to record what they want you to record. I think it's changed. I think there's more chaos now, but there's also more independence, maybe. At least that's what I feel. So yeah, and that's certainly been true from my experience. That, I mean, I was very lucky to meet this really, you know, wonderful label in London, and they sort of listen to my ideas, and yeah, and it just keeps going sort of that way, that we've been able to, you know, I guess both be happy, you know, with what I choose to record, and that's really nice, because I think that's the perpetual struggle of, I guess, of any artist, is that there's what I want to do, and then what realistically I can do, and what's maybe, you know, what everybody else has an interest in me doing, and you know, I try to find ways to make it line up as much as possible, but it's always a balance. I find it's always a balance, because it's not realistic to just say, well, I just will play only what I want to play, and everybody else can just deal with it. I mean, I've tried it a few times, but it doesn't really end so well for me. And at the same time, you know, I think it's very dangerous to just do what people want. I mean, it's very dangerous to say yes to everything, and to just seek out opportunities just for the sake of opportunities. I think that can be really, really terrible also. So it's a balance for sure. And I'm changing that balance every day to figure out what's best at this moment for me.
Yeah, because this is also something that I think, if the artists themselves don't make the or take the control of what you are playing, and what you are offering the audience, then the audience will never, you know, will always be fed the same music or the same things. And it's you as the artist who are, it's your responsibility really to educate the audience when about the music, or not educate, I mean, offer the music to the audience so that we can hear new things and experience new things.
Right.
Mm.
Right. No, and I think, sometimes we think about, like, I mean, I think Beethoven, for instance, is often used as an example of somebody who was, so revolutionary and so uncompromising, and that's sort of the image we see, and his face on statues and whatever famous portraits and whatnot. But the truth is that he often very much compromised and very much adjusted and very much even sold out in what he was doing. I mean, it's his biography, as anybody's, is very complicated, and there were moments in his life that he wrote for himself or that he wrote for the future, but there are moments that he absolutely wrote for his audience with a specific goal in mind. There are even some pieces that are, I would say, disappointing. Like, there's a piece called Wellington's Victory, which was specifically, written for kind of an occasion, and it's really, second-rate or third-rate Beethoven, which there's not a lot of that, but there's some. And it just goes to show that even somebody like him, he was, I think, very conscious of the fact that he cannot just write for himself and for his ideals. He also very much wrote for his public sometimes, and I think that's what makes him such an unbelievable figure, because he did both, and because he was so human in that sense. I think that's the interesting thing probably about every artist. I mean, another person that comes to mind in a very different way is, for instance, Shostakovich, and the way that he fought against the censorship in the Soviet Union with his music, and how, there was also a lot of give and take. And that's what's so interesting about it, is that it's not just that he only rebelled against it. I mean, that wasn't possible. So there's a constant living, breathing, balancing act that you can feel in his music, which is so, what makes it thrilling. Because if it was just one thing, I think it would be less interesting. I think, I don't know.
I always like the rebels. I think that it's the rebels that change the world a little bit, So it's, yeah. But now tell me, what would your advice be for a young pianist now, finishing his studies and getting out there in the freelance world?
Well, it's an interesting thing. I feel like it's a funny thing with advice, because I feel like I was in the audience as a student or as a kid or whatever, so many times when somebody would speak and give advice, and the advice that I would find so, wonderful, and that I would, write down and try to remember and follow, sometimes it was actually really the wrong advice for me. It was the advice that I was attracted to, but it wasn't actually so helpful, it turned out, or maybe I was missing other advice that would have been more helpful. So I don't know. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I think there's so much advice out there, but there's maybe less of people knowing themselves and what they need. So I always hesitate with any general advice, because I feel like, it totally depends on who the person is. Everybody is so different in their approach to music and their approach to life. So, if I met somebody who was extremely disciplined, but a little bit afraid of, I don't know, themselves or their own creativity, I would encourage them to be less disciplined and to, try new things in life. And if I met somebody who was, the opposite, who maybe lacked discipline or information or something, then I would encourage them to, study and practice and, be more serious, but some people should be less serious. I don't know. It's very hard to say. I don't think I would give anybody any specific advice unless I knew the person in front of me.
Oh yeah, yeah. No,
because it's easy to latch on to. I know from myself, I think I would often be very influenced by advice that I heard, and I didn't know myself well enough to understand that, oh, maybe this advice is not the right advice for me, actually. Like I was rather I had a serious approach to what I did and to music. And so I was always studying and learning and practicing. So if I met somebody I really respected who said, you really have to practice, you really have to study, then I would do it even more. And, and that wasn't necessarily the right thing. Sometimes it's more important to go to the beach, so it depends on the personality of the person.
Yeah. No, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, I haven't thought of that, but it is true. It's the different personalities need that specific advice. But now tell me, what is your wish for the future?
Yeah, my wish for the future, honestly, is to try to keep doing what I'm doing right now as long as possible. I think that at this moment, I feel very fortunate because I am making a living doing what I really deeply love. And I just hope I can do that, maybe not forever, but as forever as possible. In terms of like specific dreams, I would say that one of my ambitions now is to really dive into Johannes Brahms. I would like to play everything that he wrote for piano. I've played a lot, but not everything. So that's sort of a focus. I'm studying his music and life a lot now. And I hope to fill in the gaps of many beloved pieces that I have never performed and never recorded, or so I hope to do that. And I'm also thinking, as you mentioned, about communicating with the audience. I'm thinking about ways to also maybe verbally share some of my love of his music with people, beyond just playing it, of course, which is the most important.
I think that's wonderful, because I really, for me, doing interviews, for example, with artists, or sometimes, they would tell me something. If I talked about, if we talk about, like you said, told things about Beethoven. So these are things that I wouldn't necessarily know, but when you tell it, or somebody explains to me something about a piece they were playing, then I get so inquisitive to find out more or to hear more. And I think this will also bring a different sort of appreciation for art and for music, so I think it's wonderful if you have that idea of doing it. Yeah. But Adam, what I also, just the last thing, I ask people now to just name, this is like a shout out, name your favorite coffee place in the area where you live or where you go to. Favorite
coffee place?
Yeah.
Well, that's easy to answer, but I'm afraid it might not be well received, because it's not a public place. It's my apartment. I love coffee.
Oh, really?
I order my own beans from a place in Pennsylvania. I every morning grind beans, lightly roasted beans, and I have I do like a pour over. I measure the water and beans ratio. And I have a delicious cup of coffee every morning, as I would like it. But I'm
Fantastic.
afraid that I'm not receiving the public here yet.
But what is the place called where you get your beans from in
The,
Pennsylvania?
pla- the place I get my beans from is called Passenger
Yeah,
Coffee.
yeah,
Well, this is great. I'm promoting them. Maybe they can send me some free bags now.
yeah.
Uh,
I'll put it in the description. The link of of this place.
Well, and actually, those beans and my equipment comes with me everywhere I go. There are two strange things that I travel with when I go play concerts.
Yeah,
One is all my coffee equipment goes in my suitcase because it's very important for me to start my day with, that ritual of
yeah.
making a great cup of coffee, no matter where it is. So it takes up a lot of room in my suitcase, but I take all the stuff, my kettle, whatever, with me. And the other thing I take is my piano bench.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Yeah, I had a custom made piano bench because I sit high because I'm tall and I have very long legs, but not such a long torso, and it creates sort of proportion and balance problems for me on most benches. So I want to sit higher than usual to feel comfortable in my back. And light in my hands. So I had this custom made chair, which is higher and also has a no cushion. I don't like a cushion. I like it when it's a hard chair so I can really feel my skeletal support. So I had it custom made, and I take the legs apart and I put it in my suitcase. And it's designed
really.
to fit into even just a small carry-on suitcase. So I sometimes even take it just in the overhead compartment. And yeah.
That's so interesting. My goodness, I've never heard that somebody takes their bench with, and yeah, it's wonderful that you do that.
Well, my chamber music colleagues sometimes give me a hard time about it. When I'm playing with the violinists, cellists, clarinetists, whatever, they say, "Really, you travel with your own bench?" And they sort of make fun of me. So I just look at them. I say, "You travel with your own instrument?"
Yeah,
And but
yeah.
anyway, yeah. For me, it's important.
Yeah, but your coffee equipment, what you say you take the kettle, and then what else is there that you take for the coffee?
Well, at home I have an electric grinder, but when I travel, I have a hand grinder.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and then a scale to measure the weight of when I pour the water, so I know how much water to pour.
So you're very
Well,
precise with that.
yeah, yeah, and Beethoven was too, by the way.
Really?
Beethoven did it every morning, except he counted the beans. He had a exact number of beans he would choose, and
My goodness.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
a little ritual. But I don't think it's so uncommon these days. I somehow, and I know quite a few people that are making their own, yeah, home
No, but I
mochas.
love this. I love it when people have these things, because I think it's important. I also have my little rituals and things, and I think it's so important that we have that. I don't know, it
Mhm.
just it does make your day, it's like sort of, okay, now my day can start because I've done my thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think rituals are certainly important. It's important to feel good, and
Yeah,
it's important to yeah, have some things that are regular. And I mean, life is unpredictable enough, so it's nice to
exactly.
have something you can always look forward to and enjoy.
Yeah, no, exactly. But Adam, it was so lovely to talk to you.
Likewise, thank you, Petra. It was a really nice
Yeah.
conversation.
And I wish all your wishes will come true, and that you have a great time studying Brahms's music and have a recording of it. Is that the plan?
Yes, that's a plan. But it's a big plan, so I'm just starting it in little steps first. Yeah.
Okay. And then maybe you come to Vienna and do a concert, a Brahms
I
concert.
would love that. Vienna is,
Yeah.
it's like I don't know, ancient Egypt or Jerusalem or something for musicians. I mean, Vienna is the center of the world in some ways. I would say for musicians. So yeah, I would love to come.
Well, you just have to let me know, please, when you come.
Thank you.
Okay, Adam. I hope to see you in Vienna soon.
Yes, hope so. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Bye.